Subcommittee will come to order. I would like to welcome NSF Director Dr. Franz Córdova to the subcommittee. Good morning. The National Science Foundation is an independent federal agency charged with promoting basic research and education in science and engineering. In doing so, it is a major source of federal support for U.S. university research in the STEM fields. NSF's investments in STEM education help train the next generation of scientists and engineers. As you know, Dr. Córdova, I'm a strong supporter of NSF's, and I believe that its programs help our nation to be the world leader in major discoveries, innovations, and scientific breakthroughs. The President's budget proposal for fiscal year 2020 requests $7.06 billion for NSF, which is $1.01 billion, or 12% decrease from the 2019 enacted level. Within the total, the President's budget also proposes $5.66 billion for the research and related activities account, which is a cut of $858 million, or 13.1% below the current level. These proposed levels of funding endanger the core missions at NSF. For example, if the requested amount is enacted into law, the number of competitive awards for FY 2020 would go down from 11,600 awards in 2018 to 10,400. In a given year, NSF awards grants to over 1,800 colleges, universities, and other public and private institutions in 50 states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico. Cutting funding for NSF will inevitably leave many schools without this much needed education and research funding. The President's budget blueprint for FY 2020 also requests $823.4 million in funding for the Education and Human Resources account within NSF. This represents a cut of $86.5 million, or 9.5%. The President's budget proposal would accomplish this decrease by cutting programs that increase STEM participation, including programs that help minorities. I will strongly oppose this and will work to make sure that minority-serving institutions receive robust funding for STEM research. Another issue of importance to me is the Arecibo Observatory in Puerto Rico. The President's budget for FY 2020 proposes a total of $4.26 million for the observatory from NSF's MPS and GEO accounts, which is a reduction of $3.28 million from the FY 2019 enacted level. I strongly support the Arecibo Observatory and its mission. In short, NSF helps our economy grow, sustains our economic competitiveness, and enables us to remain the world leader in innovation. We will continue to work in a bipartisan manner to ensure that it is well funded. Thank you once again, Dr. Córdova, for joining us today. Dr. Córdova, the administration's fiscal year 2020 budget request is a significant reduction of $1.1 billion below the fiscal year 2019. Can you tell us how many fewer research grants will be awarded and how many fewer graduate fellowships?
Yes, if I do the math that both you and Mr. Adderholt just mentioned, you mentioned that we would be funding about 10,400 grants this year, and he mentioned that we were funding 11,700 grants in fiscal year 18, then that's about 1,200 to 1,400 fewer grants overall with this budget. As for the graduate research fellowships, our 20 request is for funding 1,600 graduate research fellowships. In FY18, we funded 2,000.
How many?
2,000 new ones last year, and we can fund 1,600 new ones this year, so 400 less.
Significant decreases. What other reductions will your budget request, if enacted, result in?
Pardon me?
What other budget reductions will, if your budget request is enacted,
Yes.
what other reductions will take place?
Well, we, as was mentioned, the budget is reduced about 12% from levels that we had previously, and that's a reduction in just about all of our programs. I mean, some we've kept at a few we've kept at the levels of FY18, but basically the question, the answer is that just about all of our programs will see some reductions.
For several years now, not all of the NSF programs to expand participation of groups traditionally underrepresented in science have been held flat. Your budget request cuts many of these programs. How much of the demand do these programs meet?
The programs, it's all about capacity, Chairman. If with additional investment, we can supply we can fund more programs, and more of the need is out there. Every year, we leave about $4 billion, and that's at a level of around $8 billion. We leave about $4 billion worth of good proposals on the cutting room floor, and those are proposals that are rated very good to excellent. With a recent, just as one concrete example, with a recent call for mid-scale proposals, those are proposals for instrumentation facilities in the range between a few $1 million. What we call our major research instrumentation program is below that, and the major facilities, which cost over $100 million. We received $4.7 billion in proposals just for that one opportunity from several hundred people. So there's enormous demand out there. Whatever our budget is, NSF will fund the best possible research. We have this amazing merit review process that is the gold standard, and it will judge which are the top proposals.
Yeah, and I'm concerned about that because just in your opening statement, you listed so many wonderful things that have been done, and you even listed the fact, you commented on the fact that some people might not have approved at the time and thought it was perhaps a waste of money or something, and yet it turned out to be wonderful. So we worry that these cuts are really harming our future. And look, I know that budgets are tight at times, but there are certain areas that should not take heavy cuts because they make life better for all of us and keep our country where it should be. Let me ask you, what are the major gaps in participation that NSF does not have programs to address? Are there areas missing still?
When I came to NSF now 5 years ago, I was very concerned about broadening participation, and I looked carefully into NSF's programs for that. We do spend a lot of money on broadening participation. That's part of our mission, to encourage people of all ages to have access to STEM education, and young people in particular to want to become scientists and engineers and supply the next generation with the kinds of discoveries I talked about. I was concerned that we're still not moving the needle. We still have a large untapped groups of people, of women and minorities, and that either don't have access or encouragement in science and engineering. And so I looked at the programs we do, and asking the question, are there some that we should stop doing? Should we change up the way we're doing things? And I found that the programs that we are invested in that are doing broadening participation are very good programs. They are excellent programs in different parts of the country with different kinds of missions. Some are directed towards students and provide them scholarships and all. One great example is the Hostas Community College program in the Bronx that you know about, and that's such an important program to get students the capacity, the knowledge to then go on to a four-year program like the Grove School of Engineering there at CUNY. But we still had gaps in that, and we still really need to move the needle on participation of everybody. And so we started the Includes program. The Includes program is one of our big ideas, and it is funding programs, 70 or more now, all across the United States in different areas. And the whole goal of it is to increase the representation of women and minorities in particular in STEM education. And this program now is really a network of networks. We have the different pilot programs grouped into alliances around the country, and now we have a backbone organization that's run by SRI, and they are doing evaluation and assessments of the programs, and they're networking all the investigators together because, Chairman, the basic challenge is how do you scale really good ideas? How do you make them scalable so that the whole country can understand that these are good models to replicate? And that's what the Includes program is really trying to do that hasn't been done so much before.
Thank you. Let me just touch on one subject area before I turn it, one further subject area before I turn it over to the ranking member. The Arecibo Observatory is the second largest single-dish radio wavelength reflector and has been in service since 1963. Although multiple agencies perform research at the Arecibo Observatory, NSF's Division of Astronomical Sciences has the long-standing responsibility for basic site maintenance and upkeep. We provided $16 million in disaster relief funding to repair and upgrade this facility because of Hurricane Maria. Can you give us an update on the status of the repairs at the observatory?
Yes, and in fact, I'm going to Puerto Rico next week just to see how they're doing there and to check in on the observatory and also to talk with universities like the University of Puerto Rico and its campuses. And I actually have used Arecibo in the past. I am an astrophysicist. This is my line of work in research. We spent about $2 million of that $60 million to date, starting on the repairs. We've asked OMB and Congress to approve a 5-year spend plan so that we could do in an orderly fashion address everything that we needed to address in terms of repairs and modest upgrades to this facility. So we very much appreciate that much needed money for the upgrades. It's just an outstanding facility that has made amazing discoveries, including Nobel Prize-winning discoveries.
And with that in mind, over many decades, the Arecibo Observatory has produced invaluable scientific research and discoveries. That is why I believe that the federal government should maintain ownership of this facility, even if it is administered and run by an educational institution or a private party. Will you commit to not transfer the title of the observatory to a private party?
We have no plans to transfer the title in fiscal years 19 and 20. I think you know that the whole discussion about title transfer was something that was surfaced by the management entity, the University of Central Florida, that has been of interest to them, but we have no plans to do that in the next fiscal years. We're hopeful that in the next 2 fiscal years, we're hopeful that the University of Central Florida will engage other partners, as they have committed to do, to be a part of funding the Arecibo Observatory. We know that NASA has upped its commitment to $4.65 million, and we've also given a grant to Brigham Young University to build a receiver that costs on order $5 million, a new receiver that will open up new capabilities for the observatory. And so we're continuing to fund assets that will help the university.
You'll know that
observatory.
You'll know that the answer is, while I'm still in Congress, it's okay. So you guys get ready, all right? No, I think we have a lot of friends who support the observatory. Dr. Córdova, your budget request includes a request for 98 million in funding to continue work on the modernization of the McMurdo facility in Antarctica. Could you briefly walk us through this project?
Yes. So
You know, when we're talking about Antarctica, I was telling staff I get very nervous about asking you to walk us through it just in case it's melting, you know, so.
Oh, well,
Sorry, Ms. Adderhall, I couldn't help myself.
so the Ames project really started conceptually with the Blue Ribbon panel that was conducted several years ago now, led by Norm Augustine, in which a panel of very distinguished scientists, engineers, evaluated the situation at the McMurdo Station, which is one of 3 stations that comprise the U.S. Antarctica program and that NSF runs on behalf of the country. And McMurdo is the first station that you arrive at there on the continental coast. And it is by far the largest station, and it's an important depot for logistics to the South Pole and logistics to all the camps where research is done around the McMurdo area. It is a very aging facility. It is something like 40, 50 years old, and it looks like an old mining town that's been left unattended for decades. I first went there in 1996 when I was NASA's chief scientist as part of the team to evaluate the conditions at the South Pole Station. As a consequence of the Senate look at that and Congress's look at that, the South Pole Station was refurbished, but not McMurdo. And so McMurdo in the intervening years has just become more and more in need of refurbishment. So the Ames project was our attempt to come up with a modernization for science program. It stands for Antarctica Infrastructure Modernization for Science, to address this. And it is a very ambitious safety. It will address logistics. It will get rid of a lot of old crumbling buildings there and put things together in a much more streamlined, efficient plan in order to be able to handle logistics in a better, cheaper, faster way eventually, but not without an initial cost in order to pay for it. So that cost has just been determined by a design review. A final design review was just completed a few months ago and presented to our National Science Board in February of this year, and they approved that cost, which is about $410 million, and it's starting right away. We're already doing procurements for the ships that will then take all the supplies down there on the next season, which starts in October.
You know, this question comes to mind. It's not a prepared question. So we're there doing some work, research, and so on now. What other countries are in that continent?
There are many, many other countries that are there, and you can see the flags flying of more than a dozen, maybe close up to 24 nations. I don't even know. Last time I counted the flags, there were 17, but there may be more now of nations that are involved in Antarctica. Yeah.
Thank you. As I understand it, due to the harsh weather and remote location, there are only certain times of the year this work can be done. How will the timing of appropriations impact the completion of the project?
We
tend not to always be on time.
Yes. Well, we kind of figured that out a few years ago when we had a shutdown that started on October 1st, and I think in 2013. And so we now, for Antarctica operations in general, we forward fund the operations so that we don't get stuck with people and equipment and everything during the crucial season, which goes from October to February. For this project, we're fine for starting out for the coming year because the board did approve it, and we have the funds. Thank you again for FY19 funds to do the procurements. And so by the time the icebreaker goes and breaks the ice and the supply ships follow it to McMurdo, that we'll have it all ready. But in general, your question is a very good one, that appropriations are important on time so that we can make the procurements. Because once you miss a year, you've missed, once you miss that deadline of when the icebreaker comes and breaks the ice there in, I think it's early October, so then you've lost the entire season.
You know, I may be the only member of Congress who ever so often makes it sound like gridlock does not bother me, because gridlock is a result of democracy. There are countries where the budget is always on time, you know, because there's only a couple of people making the decision. And here we have a lot of people making the decision. Your budget request includes $75 million for a new mid-scale infrastructure program, which would invest in research facilities smaller than a telescope, for example, but larger than what can be funded within existing programs. Can you give us some examples of what sort of projects these would be?
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, we got a few hundred proposals in for our first mid-scale launch, and those just recently arrived, and they total about $4.7 billion in requests. I can't talk about those specific proposals, of course, because they're being evaluated, but I can give you several examples of projects that we are doing that are within that frame of a few $1 million to about $70 million or $100 million. So one is Advanced LIGO Plus. Advanced LIGO Plus was financed because of the augmentation we got in FY18. And so we funded it over 18 and continuing into 19, and that project is within that budgetary amount. And that is going to open up a huge volume of the universe to be able to detect gravitational waves. We have funded upgrades to the Alvin submersible vehicle to study our oceans. That is also in the same monetary framework. We funded improvements to NHERI, which it's earthquake research that has a shake table that needed refurbishment. We funded a refurbishment to the Palmer Pier in Antarctica. Palmer's one of our 3 stations there that desperately needed funding, and that was also in that that same money framework. And then finally, the 2 detectors for the Large Hadron Collider, which are done together under MREFC. If we had funded them individually, each one is our upgrade is $75 million contribution, so that would have fit within that area. So you can see then from geoscience to engineering to math and physical sciences, they all have very important projects that can be done as mid-scale projects. There's just tremendous demand out there. And as technology improves, there are more and more projects that are going to be costing less money. I guess I could mention computer and information science and their recent $60 million for the Frontera computer, a supercomputer, high-performance supercomputer at the University of Texas, Austin. That's also in that framework. So it doesn't matter what discipline you're in, there's a lot of important projects that can be done.
In September 2018, this is my last question, NSF released its new policy on dealing with sexual harassment by foundation grantees, including the possibility of terminating grant funding because of harassment. Is it your sense that the policy is working, and how many complaints have you received?
It is our sense that the policy is working for a couple of reasons. One is just we've gotten tremendous feedback from the community over how important this is, and it will hold institutions accountable for the conduct of researchers. And so that in itself is makes people feel more empowered in the work and the research they're doing. It was a real eye-opener to see how devastating harassment can be even within the science and engineering communities. We have gotten, universities are being very responsive and calling us at the first inkling that something is amiss, just to get our advice, even as they're proceeding with their own inquiries and investigations. We have teams that go out, as you probably know, for a long time and have checked on Title IX compliance. And so those teams are continuing to be out there. But I think as far as your question is concerned on how many, that's a question that is changing, as you can imagine, as we proceed. And I'd have to ask our Office of Diversity and Inclusion to get back to you with specific numbers. You have to realize that we actually put this into force as of the end of October. I think it was October 26th of this past year. So there's been relatively little time and we had to shut down in the middle of that for universities, for things to happen since that time. So we can also expect that we really need to evaluate any rise in the number of such instances over the next couple of years. That will be the important marker here.
Have any investigators had their grant funding withdrawn?
Under this program that we just started, this new term and condition as of late October, not to my knowledge, but again, our people that are doing that would have to get back to you. We are notified, and we have been for a long time, when investigators commit a transgression, and we have been on top of it and looked into it before this using our Title IX wherewithal, and their universities have removed investigators. And then when the research is implicated, when they have NSF funding, then we work with the universities to see if that research should continue or not with a different principal investigator or whatever, to make accommodations for the research itself without the investigators. But it's really, in the end, it's up to the institutions to do something. And then right now, they are required to report to us when they have done something, so that we don't get the information secondhand as we had previously. But there have been people that have been removed from research by the universities in the past.
Thank you.